Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning, Drew.
Good to talk to you. And I really wanted to come out to Peoria to check out the whiskey capital of the world, but it just so happens that schedules weren't working, and I didn't know when I was going to get up that way. So here we are through the magic of the internet, and we'll get a chance to talk a little bit of whiskey history and your journey to owning a whiskey distillery.
Outstanding.
So give me a little background. You are CEO. Is that your official title?
President, CEO, jack of all trades.
Okay.
Traveling salesman the last 3 days. So, but yeah, I was in, I worked for a British computer networking equipment distributor. I ran the U.S. division for 15 years and developed a nice taste for single malt whiskey in my trips over to the UK and Ireland and Scotland and Irish whiskey, and that developed over time into I really like bourbon.
Okay.
And I was on the board of directors of a craft brewery in Fort Worth, Texas, and I love beer. I love the beer business, but I started to get really intrigued about the distilling business and started kicking around the idea of starting one. Being an aficionado and not an expert, those are two different things that I learned very quickly. And I attended several conferences on craft distilling and what does it take and how much capital you need. And then this was in about 2015. I got contacted in 2017 about, hey, there's a distillery available for sale. Would that be of interest to you? And I was thinking to myself, well, that's a nice shortcut. Rather than having to learn this all, there's already an operating distillery. And that kind of, and then I said, where? And it came Peoria, Illinois. And so we started talking about it. The deal went on and off. And anyway, long story short, at the end of 2018, it started up again in earnest. And they said, he's still interested. And we really came together on this to try to make a deal. And we acquired it in April of 2019.
Okay.
And moved here. And I exited the computer networking business for good.
So this is
illustrious career.
Yeah, and so your fiance, she's also in the business?
My wife now.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So, and she's an attorney.
That's correct.
So this is what's curious to me is that the more interviews I do, the more I find that ex-IT people and ex-attorneys or attorneys seem to like to go into the whiskey business, and so I'm trying to figure out how that works out.
It's really funny because we both were, I would call it, a little burned out on what we were doing, and that's it. I mean, we both have embraced this business, but I think you just hit on something really funny here, because one of my initial iterations of my business plan, which I hadn't done one for 25 years, I think, I sent to a friend of mine in Boston, and he said, all I see here is a sales guy and an attorney. I don't see the expertise you need to actually execute on anything. And I said, you know what, you're absolutely correct. And I knew we really needed to bring that additional talent onto the team. And when we found Jeff Murphy, that was really the puzzle that started to fit together. And I realized I didn't know much of anything, really.
Yeah.
I knew it was. I thought it was cool. I knew I had my favorite whiskey brands, and I could describe them relatively well. But in terms of the bureaucracy and the legalese behind and the regulatory stuff with the TTB and the State Department of Revenue, I just had no idea of any of that. So it's not for the faint of heart. If my hair wasn't gray before, it certainly is turning gray.
Nice.
And so, Jeff came on board with his many, many years of distilling experience, We were fortuitous in also having a gentleman named Nick Nelson, who was with Brown-Forman for 23 years, including a stint as national brand manager for Woodford Reserve, join our board of directors, and he's helped strategize, he's helped lay out from a marketing standpoint where we need to go, and so this has all been instrumental. Along the way, I've learned a lot since April of 2019. I am much more knowledgeable than I was. And honestly, I thought I was pretty knowledgeable, but there's so much to it. But I think one of the things that we were talking about before we got recording was about Peoria, because I'd never been down here. I'd never been in Peoria. And I went to school at University of Wisconsin, so it's only 3 hours away from here.
Yeah.
But I just had never. I've been to Chicago, but I'd never really been to Peoria.
It's like, why take that turn down, the interstate to get to Peoria? Because in your head you're saying, okay, so what is there? Because I've been through Peoria myself, but I didn't go into town. I was in a business meeting in Bloomington, and
right,
and then I drove by.
Bloomington's the prime. Yeah, Bloomington. You go through Bloomington. You can go to Champaign on 74, but you largely go right. You go right through town. I mean, so it's just one of those things. It's very much worth peeling the layers back of the history, and I guess when we talk about getting into the distilling business and why here, why here is it was located here, but then what's so fascinating about that? And so I think the librarian at the Peoria Public Library thought I was a stalker because I came back about 8 times with a stack of history books on Peoria. So I wanted to do a deep dive, and I'm clearly not from here. I'm a transplant, but I thought, if I talk about this town, I want to be able to talk about it with some authority that I've researched it, and I'm not even partially way done because, as you mentioned before we got on the recording, there is a lot of information there. It's not you can abridged version of what the history is, and then there's such a deep dive that you really need to do to dig into the characters and these great Gilded Age characters.
Yeah. So when you got to town for the first time, that you obviously did some scouting around and seeing whether this was a place that you would want to move to, because
we came for 10 days before we closed on the acquisition.
Yeah.
Just to say, hey, is this a place we can live? And then let's drive around and what's here and what. And there's so much more than you think.
Yeah.
You just have a picture in your head of a flat, in the middle of a cornfield. And in fact, it's not. It's rolling hills. It's on a river bluff. The Illinois River is beautiful.
Yeah.
It flows through town. So it's completely and utterly different than what we thought.
So does it end up being a kind of more...
Jeff's just walking in.
Oh, is he? Okay.
He'll jump on with us.
All right, perfect. So your first impressions of it, is it a... are there a lot of the historic buildings still around, or does it seem like it's modernizing, or what kind of impressions do you get?
It's a town that I can tell did what my hometown of Minneapolis did. A lot of urban renewal, probably a lot of, why do we need these old buildings? It was before that historical landmark push. Mm-hmm. So things from the early 1900s were getting demolished. There's still some really cool old buildings downtown, but a number of the historic liquor baron homes are still there.
Okay.
So that's what's interesting to me. You've got a really, Bradley University, the Bradley University Moss Avenue area reminds me very much of St. Paul, Minnesota, which beautiful homes on each side. The governor's mansion is over there.
Yeah, I had
it's that sort of thing that you've got these old kind of gilded mansions from those days that are still there, and they've been, many restored just beautifully.
Yeah. So can you actually go in, like Joseph Greenhut was the one that was the president of the trust? Is that a house that you can go into, or
it's unfortunately no, because it's an apartment building. It was chopped up into an apartment building. Oh. Most of the gilding and all the beautiful is all gone on that house.
Wow.
But there are others that have been restored that are beautiful. There's the Pettingill Mansion. I wanted to use Pettingill as the name of our gin and have the house as the backdrop. And the Peoria Historical Society, they own the house. They've said absolutely not. And I said, on what grounds? Well, he was a teetotaler and a prohibitionist, and was not involved in the liquor business. And so I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. So Jeff has joined us.
Good morning. Murphy. Sorry about that. I missed the Eastern part on that 9:30. I saw it was 9:30 yesterday.
This is always the great challenge between trying to get Eastern time to Central time. I lived in Central time for some years, so I'm used to that kind of back and forth on that.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on. Sorry I'm late.
Oh no,
I haven't gotten used to that. Where I just drove out east a few weeks ago, and you go over the Illinois-Indiana border, and you've lost an hour. And I go,
yeah. So, well, it's even more confusing. I was in Nashville, and then I had to go up to Louisville, and there's an hour change between those two, and you're thinking, well, they're like, it's a straight line between these two. What are you talking about? So, well, Jeff, you came from the opposite direction. You came from the south rather than from the north.
Yeah.
And so your start was, I've heard that you were overseas doing beer at one time.
Yeah, I got in the industry professionally in Singapore. I was making craft beer over there in Singapore for Asia Pacific breweries. Mm-hmm. So, which is like the Budweiser of Asia, so to speak. I was in the craft brew arm. And then we came back to Texas, and I got into distilling. And was making whiskey and vodka in Texas, and then I went to do a year of rum in Massachusetts at Privateer, and then the last 8 years before coming here, I was running a rum distillery in Louisiana called Louisiana Spirits.
Okay, so big change between rum. This is something I don't 100% understand, is the creation of rum versus the creation of whiskey.
It's all the raw materials. It's just molasses instead of grains. Or sugars instead of grains, but the science is the same. It's the flavors are a little bit different. So
we'll jump in a little bit more into what you guys are doing now in terms of the distillery, and I understand there's growth going on. So we'll get through that as well. Talking about the whiskey capital of the world, Peoria, and so were either of you aware of that standing before you got there?
No.
Yes, I because it was mentioned to me by the Williams brothers. And I said
it's a selling point.
I said, I've never heard that before. And then again, and Jeff and I have talked about this. Yeah, we don't know. I have no idea. I've never heard that before in my life. Then you get here and you go, that's legit. That's exactly what happened.
So. It's got to be interesting taking over a brand that is a legacy brand from a family that just brought the name back, because they only had gotten into the distilling business or back into it around 2013. So when you were doing this purchasing of the brand, did they have all sorts of research and stuff that they had done, or family photos, or because we're talking about a man who was a bootlegger, but he also apparently worked at distilleries previous to that.
We've gotten kind of cursory information, but the story is a true one and a legitimate story. It doesn't come along with a lot of detail on what distillery did he work for originally when Prohibition hit. Where did he conduct his bootlegging operation? But he did bootleg, and he did feel the need to flee in the middle of the night with his family when the criminal elements were closing in on trying to take a share of his profits.
Yeah.
And so that is the real story. The recipe, the mash bill, at least on the bourbon, is his original one. I can't say that the yeast strain that we're using is the same.
Yeah.
But just the basic mash bill is the same. And so, that's a namesake. It's not a made up character. I think it's a cool story. And I think there are a number of, we'll call them just brands that are just that. It's a fictionalized character that doesn't have any historical, factual information attached to it.
Yeah. So it's a wheated bourbon, it looks like.
Correct. It's 10%. Jeff can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's 80% corn, 10% wheat, 10% barley. So although it's a minor amount, it's still considered a wheated bourbon instead of rye. So.
And you think it was mostly because, I mean, in that area, would you find equal amounts of rye and wheat?
Not normally. It's a little bit too warm, I think, for wheat. You got to go a little bit farther north to find wheat and rye. Corn was prevalent, so it might have just been what he could get a hold of at the time. Someone I talked to Tuesday said that there is wheat around here somewhere. He knows because he used to work for the grain elevators and they had wheat available. So there is some wheat around here somewhere.
Yeah.
You just have to track it down.
Yeah, I guess you would just need to grab whatever was on hand, and it's smaller amounts. It's still bourbon.
Correct.
For the most part. Where the thing is that when you're talking about a bootlegger and not a brand, that does make for a little bit of chaos in trying to, trace this stuff back because records wouldn't have been kept and all of that. So
yeah, and like you said, there's probably a good chance that he was just fermenting whatever he could get his hands on at the time, and not necessarily kept this recipe the entire time.
Yeah, he had some big names after him, didn't he?
Yeah.
Al
Capone and the O'Neill brothers.
The O'Neill brothers were they were the Peoria gangsters. They were the gangsters of note. But Capone ran a lot of his liquor came out of Peoria during Prohibition.
Interesting. It makes you wonder about these branching out towns like this, a town that was known for making whiskey at that point, and then you have these. I don't know how many distilleries were left when Prohibition hit, but I mean that had to be a big strike for the town of Peoria, and how it struggled through going from such a massive whiskey industry to all of a sudden not being able to make any at all.
As I recall, none of the Peoria distilleries continued with the special permit to make medicinal whiskey.
Yeah.
They were all Kentucky or elsewhere, but none in Peoria. So
there was 8.
There were 8. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then good.
Well, and how long did it take for Illinois to get? Because this craft distilling revolution has just been a recent thing. So, how long ago was it before Illinois finally came out of Prohibition, allowing distilling again?
Same year.
Same year.
As soon as Prohibition was over, let's see, 2 opened right back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 more opened back up in the year after.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and then what happened? Because it really, again, it's died out before now starting to come back again. So it was just kind of a slow fade.
I don't know what year, but I mean, it really, with taste changing and away from brown spirits, I think that also had a lot to do with this. Hiram Walker, this was a successful brand. I mean, Hiram Walker was the largest whiskey distillery on the planet.
Yeah.
Here. And so they closed in 1982 as tastes changed. And for whatever reason, they decided to pull out of this market. But the craft really, I don't know when. I think it was around 2010, 2009 that you can trace back the first craft distilleries coming back here.
Yeah.
And I think we've got maybe 15 in the Illinois Craft Distillers Association. There may be a couple more that I'm not aware of, but there's some recognizable names out there. Whiskey Acres, Koval, Chicago Distilling, Vaughn Brothers. And we're just trying to reestablish ourselves as one of those.
Yeah.
As a recognized quality producer.
There's more than one distillery in town now, as I understand.
There's another one that's just started up, a Black Band.
Yeah.
Distilling downtown in the Warehouse District.
Yeah. So how does that, because I hear these names, Warehouse District and Distillery Row and all of that. Is there any semblance of that still there? Or are these just names that kind of got attached to sections of town?
No, I mean, that was there. There's an apartment building called the Cooperage that used to be exactly that. There are steel plants down there that fabricated steel for various distilleries. But by and large, the only two that are left that have really a tie back to the area are the ADM plant, which is the former site of the Great Western Distillery, and then subsequently the Hiram Walker plant. So that's still in operation, making ethanol. And then the Lacey Brewery is on the north side of town, just over the 74 bridge, and that is PMP fermentation products.
Okay.
So that those two are really the last standing. Now, I'm not sure down in Pekin there were some distilleries as well, but I don't know if there's anything standing there any longer.
Yeah. It seemed that from my reading that it basically was distilleries all the way down to Pekin.
Right.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, when you have as many distilleries, how many distilleries did you just say our count was of named distilleries during that time period?
Well, there were 73 distilleries, but it was not all at once. Mm-hmm. From the start of distilleries here till the end, it was 73 distilleries.
Yeah, and it was a big brewing town too, right?
24 breweries.
Yeah, and saloons.
A lot of saloons.
A lot of saloons.
How
many saloons do you have in town now versus?
Not that many. I think they lined up. From my reading, from my research, it was very much the Wild West. It was saloons, gambling, brothels. This was quite the swinging town, I guess, at one time.
Yeah, it's so close. I mean, you're about 2.5 hours from Chicago, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, from us, yes, 2 hours and 20 minutes to Michigan Avenue from here.
Okay.
So
yeah. So everything that's going on in Chicago is Peoria, just a little Chicago, basically, at that point.
It really was. And if you look at some of the manufacturing around here, and Caterpillar being the most notable, but again, I think this had the potential to be the next Chicago. Had it been a little more diversified, maybe.
Yeah.
Or a mini Chicago, but it ended up when the distilling industry, by and large, went away here. It became a cat town.
Yeah.
This is what drove pretty much everything here.
Which is, I think, the impression that we all get. We don't think of it as a whiskey place because it hasn't been for so long.
Right.
It has been more farm equipment and
mining equipment.
Yeah, really buying into that. So, as I was doing my research on the Whiskey Trust, what have you learned? What has fascinated you about hearing about the Whiskey Trust? Is there?
The Whiskey Trust to me is just. It was, the group of these guys, perhaps not the nicest people on the planet. I don't know. We don't know them personally, but
yeah,
I'm sensing, like many of these, what they call oligarchs today, I guess, but these barons were pretty ruthless at times. And if you were part of the Whiskey Trust, you would get a share. Theoretically, you'd get a share of the profits, but you might very well get your distillery shut down.
Yeah.
And I know at least one distillery in Chicago, the Schufelt, H.H. Schufelt distillery, was dynamited.
Yeah.
For not acquiescing to the offer that you can't refuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then your plant gets blown up, and you decide, I think I'll sign now.
Yeah, it was interesting to read about that because there's actually, if you dig online, you can find old newspapers, Rockford newspaper from back then that was talking about the Whiskey Trust and saying in great detail how the secretary of the Whiskey Trust had been arrested and how they had basically ensnared him by what he had done was he had given a gauger a device that was like a pistol that he was supposed to drop into a vat. And the idea of what was going to happen was that it was going to then give him 2 to 3 to 4 hours to get away. And then the thing was going to pop inside there, create a spark, and blow up the distillery. And there was some fluid or something that was inside of it. And he said, you just have to add this fluid to it. Well, to ensnare the guy, what they did was they said, he got back with him and said, you need to send me some more fluid because the fluid that you gave me I think it's deteriorating. And so when he came back to visit town, he had a briefcase with the fluid in it, and they arrested him as he was going into the hotel where he was going to be staying. And come to find out, when they tested it, they realized that thing was going to blow up immediately. It was not going to blow up in 3 to 4 hours. So it was basically to get rid of any witnesses who might have
the guy who was
known the plot. Yeah, the gauger was going to get blown up.
The gauger was going to get blown up at the same time.
Yeah. So when you talk about ruthless, and that was actually the second attempt because they actually had bombed it like a year before. So it. Yeah, these guys were hardcore when it came to.
We've been thinking about these whiskey barons, the Whiskey Trust, and Green Hut was certainly one of the wealthiest guys from that era, and controlled it. But there are some other really interesting characters, and our gin that we're releasing pretty soon pictures one of the old mansions in the background. It's Edward Easton. Mm-hmm. He was primarily a grain trader, but he had his fingers in the distilling business as well. And it's been totally restored. It's a marketing agency now. Still has the pocket doors. There's a portrait of Edward Easton. It's been repaired now, but it's been slashed right down his face.
Oh man!
So, took a knife. So again, you kind of start piecing together these little tidbits of information that maybe these guys weren't the most scrupulous and maybe they weren't the nicest people, but it built the town. There'd be no town. There wouldn't be the cultural institutions. They built great churches. They built opera houses. But, like every other city, fire was a major problem. These great places, many of them burned down. The Opera House here was gorgeous, burned down, or it was torn down in the name of urban renewal that we need to put up this modern thing. And those buildings, at least as I relate it to Minneapolis, those buildings are being torn down now as being not significant to anybody.
Yeah. That's the sad part is you lose some of that history when you are walking around downtown Peoria. It'd be interesting to go see where the Whiskey Trust's old building was and get that kind of history.
In my research, I found there were a number of maps that actually show you exactly where each distillery was.
Okay.
And it's really interesting to find, and I don't have it in front of me today, and it shows all the way from sort of the 74 bridge that splits kind of downtown Peoria and then East Peoria. But it just shows on the dots where exactly all these distilleries were, all the way to Pekin.
Wow.
So it's really fascinating to see that and how many. And we've seen pictures at the Historical Society, and they're black and white. It was pretty grim industrial. I mean, this is not. You don't see many people. You see smokestacks. You see, it
was an industrial town.
Really industrial.
Being distilleries, it was still very high output.
Right.
So this is what scares me is when I start looking at these numbers. In 1 year, the Whiskey Trust alone, and that's not including the independent distillers that were in Peoria, but as a whole, and this wouldn't be all out of Peoria, in the year 1892, they had 45 million gallons worth of spirits that they created between gin, rectified whiskey, and the rest. So, I mean, and if you think about that, as I was reading on it, it said they basically owned every distillery that was in active operation north of the Ohio River, and that's a pretty big area, and produced 95% of the distilled high wine spirits and alcohol produced in the entire United States.
God, I think that's accurate. And the other one I saw, I can't remember what year it was from. There was a number that Peoria, and I think this was related to whiskey and not anything else, but that Peoria produced 18 million barrels of whiskey, and Kentucky did 15. So we've been, even at its peak, we were well ahead of Kentucky, and obviously overtaken, not too far after that. But yeah, this was the whiskey capital for sure.
Yeah. But the thing about the Whiskey Trust was that they would go in and they would basically buy a distillery, and then in most cases they would shut it down, because I think they were only running about 10 to 12 distilleries total, and they were getting that output out of that few distilleries, but they were basically robbing the distilleries they were shutting down for parts, and then fixing up the ones that they had and making them larger. So yeah, it's an incredible output. But if you think about it, for Peoria, you have this large organization that's all spread across the U.S., and their hub is in Peoria. That puts a lot of focus on that town. There had to be a lot of money in that town in that day.
Yeah, and I think some of it went after Prohibition. Some of it moved on into banking. Some of these fortunes were still there.
Yeah.
It just got transferred and then handed down, and people scattered. And so there's still some remnants of the old fortunes in town here. There's still some of the grand old houses, both in Peoria Heights, where the country club is, and then on Moss Avenue and that surrounding area. And it's fascinating just to drive through there, because you get a feel for a little bit of the past.
Yeah. So when we're talking about independence around there, the one name that stands out to me is Clark's, because Clark's Pure Rye was actually a very successful brand. And you said that you actually had recently seen a collection of some memorabilia that was pretty cool.
We can't mention his name.
Yeah.
It's such an extensive collection. But Jeff can maybe tell a little bit more about it.
Yeah, he's this gentleman actually came in to our tasting room one day, and he's like, "Well, I just dropped my wife off at the chiropractor, and they said it'd be about an hour, and this is a better waiting room than the chiropractor's office." So he came in, he just started talking with us, and he goes, "I have a really in-depth collection." And I'm like, "Oh, we'd love to see it," and just trying to get the time to go to his house and everything else, and how things were going to work out. And then one day he came back in, he just kind of brought us this book on distilling in Peoria. That's where I was quoting all these numbers for the distilleries that were open at the time. And I tried so hard to have the time to copy the book so we could have the information so I could get it back to him. I'm just taking photos of the pages.
Yeah.
But we finally made it to his house, and he has like over 100 shot glasses, all pre-prohibition of the distilleries and post prohibition as well. He's got 2 4-inch binders that have letters, ledgers, certificates, advertisements.
Historical.
Yeah.
What I found most fascinating is there's personal correspondence from the president of Clark's to was it someone on the West Coast? Anyway, just you get a handle that there's some business that people don't know about in the public going on, where maybe some West Coast interests were investing in this. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
To see personal correspondence like that in an archive. And then What else did he have?
He had all kinds of like knickknacks that they use for marketing. He had a 2 pewter cigar punches from Clark, and then in the binder we actually found the advertisement that went with it. And then they had
Lighters,
branded beauty marks for women, so they could put the little dot on their face for the beauty
nice.
mark.
Yeah.
He had all kinds of bottle openers from the eras and everything else. It was really fascinating. We only had about an hour there, but I could probably spend a month there just going through everything.
He's got a museum in his house.
Yeah, and he said he'd been collecting since the 70s and just hitting estate sales and flea markets and stuff like that. And we talked to him frequently. And
I was most amazed probably by when you came out with that, holding up that big piece of metal.
Yeah.
I said, "What in the hell's that?" And you turned it around. Hiram Walker and Sons original sign that was on the gates entering the distillery.
Wow.
Yeah, he's got that. So
So it's one of those things. Who has that?
Yeah.
there was a rye bottle there that I love the name of it, so I'm not going to say it because I don't want someone else to go out and use it before I can research it. But I want to see if I can find that name, because the name of it and the bottle shape was really cool.
Yeah.
So I think
We may revive that name.
exactly. If we can find enough information, it'd be cool to revive something like that and keep it going again.
Yeah,
So.
some of these brands, I think were absorbed. I actually saw Imperial whiskey, and I want to say it's a Brown Forman brand, but it's still out there. It's bottom shelf.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But this was a Hiram Walker brand. So some of these brands have been absorbed into Kentucky brands. So
And you got to watch
But
it, because
again-
a lot of distilleries or a lot of distilling companies will buy up these names and not use them. They just hang on to them, and
Correct.
yeah. So it's hard to know. But there are. I mean, I saw a list of 12 names of independent distillers that were, well, they weren't all independent. Some, like Monarch, and I think it was a Manhattan distillery also in town there, that they were owned by the trust. So, and in fact, I think both of them caught fire at one point or another, and the reason was suspect. That just after what had happened in Chicago, all of a sudden now here is a distillery where they were doing experiments to try to speed up the process of making whiskey, and now all of a sudden that distillery gets burned down.
a string of suspect fires.
Yes.
And explosions.
Absolutely.
And this is something that we never knew was made here too. Well, so there was one from A.L. and Company called Jersey, which was a whiskey.
Yeah.
And then also they had absinthe.
Oh,
So
okay.
these are original bottles from the area.
Wow.
So just really, really cool collection
Yeah.
that he has of all these things.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, when you're distilling, you can distill all manner of things. So, and the distillery they were trying to bomb up in Chicago was actually making Holland gin.
That's right.
So they were interested in, and Calumet was another distillery that they acquired at the same time. Because that's the thing is, they bombed it. They somehow had the judge throw out the second case, and so the second case gets, so here probably less than a year later, they ended up selling to the trust. So after two very suspect and really, the evidence was there. I remember reading.
It's the offer you can't refuse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that talks about being above the law. But then you think how much revenue the Internal Revenue Service is getting from 90 cents per gallon from somebody who's making 45 million gallons worth of whiskey a year. Do they really want to shut those guys down?
Right. And I mean, and I mean, they say that Peoria paid for the Civil War, because of all the taxes that were coming out of it at the time. It was, and then they didn't start income tax until Prohibition because all the money was gone from the distilleries.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a fascinating history.
What we hear, but again, I guess Jeff and I have really appreciated since we've been here, are people like that gentleman stopping in and sharing what he has, and we have become a repository. Bottles, and people have said, "I really want you to have this," and I said, "Well, we'll display it."
Yeah.
So I've got some Hiram Walker bottles here.
Yeah.
That are pretty cool. If you want to see those.
Yeah. Pop those up there.
I'll start with the. This is, again, you can still find this on the shelf, but these are sealed, so it'll be interesting to see what that tax code date relates to. But my guess is, this is probably from the 70s or 60s.
Yeah.
I had a lady in town here, gave me some of her liquor. Her father was an attorney with Hiram Walker, and I've got Canadian Club. I've got a Ballantine's. These are all sealed from it says 1966. So here's one. This is really interesting to me. This is the one that is the special bottle they gave out. This was for the 8 millionth barrel. It was a commemorative gold bottle given to employees. So this was distilled in 1970 or 1965, and given out in 1973. Walker's Deluxe.
Yeah.
And then here's how Walker's Deluxe sold. Here's their decanter style. It's still sealed.
Yeah. You showed me the price on that. How much for that?
Yeah,
How much you want to sell me that bottle for?
$5.19.
Deal.
And then I've got one in back that's sealed. This one apparently is not sealed. So Jeff and I are going to drink this one.
Nice.
This Walker's Deluxe.
Yeah.
Again, I have no idea what the year is on this, but oh well. We'll drink that one anyway.
Well, whiskey's meant to be consumed. It wasn't.
Right.
It's not supposed to be a display. I have a bottle that's 100 years old, and it's like, I'm going to taste it. There's just no way I couldn't do that.
I did. I had in Minnesota. We were digging through the attic at my late father-in-law's house and found I.W. Harper for medicinal purposes only.
Ah, yes.
Distilled 1918, bottled whenever, and it said for medicinal purposes only right inside of the box. I drank it. Sorry.
Nice. Yeah.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah. So I looked it up, and Imperial is Sazerac. And,
okay.
And so the reason why I looked it up was because when I was in Pittsburgh, I was in the Pittsburgh airport, and somebody said, if you're in Pittsburgh, you have an imp and urn. And an imp and urn is a shot of Imperial whiskey with an Iron City beer. So, yeah. Apparently that's a thing.
It's got a bigger following than I might
think. Well, at least in Pittsburgh it does.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, so it's fun to see all these old bottles. Are there any other brands that you've heard of that came out of that Hiram Walker era? Was it mostly bourbons they were making in Peoria?
Oh, I think, Jeff, what else did we see out there? I was trying to think of this archive that we looked at. It was, he was heavy on Clark's.
Yeah.
Clark, right. But there were some other brands. I can't remember some of the other names.
Looks like it's blurry because I'm zooming in too far. See, Clark's Pure Rye. This looks like Martle's Pure Rye. Yeah, he had a lot of Clark's.
Yeah. And I think that was, I mean, what's interesting about Clark's is that they actually joined the trust, but somehow they got away. Because, they were part of it initially because they got talked into it and said, oh, here's all the great profits you'll get. They dismantled their distillery. Then they got out of their contract somehow and then opened up their own new distillery and stayed a competitor for a while. I guess you can't really call them a competitor when they're that much smaller than this behemoth.
You wonder, you know what? It would be so interesting to dig through the archives and get the real story on that. How did they get away?
Yeah.
How did that contract bust up, and how did they remain independent long term?
Absolutely.
So I'm sure there's a very interesting and intriguing story.
Yeah.
Possibly a little Boardwalk Empire-esque.
Yeah, it may be.
Possibly.
There's going to be a movie about it one of these days.
Yeah.
So Jeff, you came to the business, and as you said, you had worked in Texas and also in Louisiana. You're originally from Louisiana, correct?
No, I'm originally from Arizona.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah.
That's the Arizona Cardinals shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I grew up in a small mining town called Baghdad, so in Arizona.
Wow.
So yeah, no H.
Okay.
So, and then joined the Navy to see the world. Met my wife, got married. So we were both. I'll tell you my Irish trifecta story real quick. So I was a medic in hospital corpsman in the Navy. I was a police officer in Maryland for 6 years, and then I've been brewing and distilling now for 15 years or so. I tell people I went from treating drunks to arresting drunks to getting people drunk. So that's my
nice.
Last name of Murphy. That's my Irish trifecta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So when you were in, you worked for Rebecca Creek, is that
Correct.
were you? And then
when they
you
were
were
starting
working.
up.
So you were working on German stills there.
Yeah, they were not Coates. They were. I can see the name of it. But yeah, it was German. It was a German still there and a German still in Massachusetts as well.
Yeah.
So.
And then when you came to, how did you guys get started here? Because you're actually, as I understand it, you've been expanding a bit. And so are you working off the equipment that you got from J.K. Williams originally, or are you upgrading and slowly replacing, or?
Yeah, so what we originally had from J.K. Williams is they did everything off of a 60-gallon stainless steel pot still, basically, with a copper head on it. Mm-hmm. And then they had a 120-gallon still that they never commissioned. So we got those both up and running. So right now, and they were doing all small barrel formats. So they're doing 23 and 30-gallon barrels before. So they're doing about a barrel a week, roughly, is what they were doing. So now I'm getting a barrel about every 7 to 10 days, depending on how fast I turn over the system. But it's usually it's only 240-gallon fermentations. So, about every 2 weeks I can fill a barrel. And that's what we're working on now. And then our new system is a 1,000-gallon system. So where we only have one fermenter here, which is actually, we're using the mash tun as the fermenter because it has the only cooling jacket on it. We'll have 4 1,000-gallon fermenters with the new system. And I'll be doing 10 to 12 barrels a week instead.
Big difference.
So, yeah, big difference. So
helps supply. And so when you're growing out into Wisconsin, which is where I hear you're going to be next, that extra supply will help.
Yeah, I mean, we still have some barrels. We'll have some bourbon for a while. The rye is going to get a little bit slim here after a while, but then that's why we have our bridge series. I don't know if Andy's talked about that yet, but a lot of places that start up, they source to start while their stuff is aging. Mm-hmm. We already have stuff. We'll be doing a sourcing program because we need to bridge that gap between the stocks that we have and the 4 years it's going to take for the new stocks to age. So, it's the bridge series, and it's along the same lines of, like, say, the Discovery series from Bardstown is how we're going to play it. Where we're going out and sourcing the best stuff we can find and doing blends, and we're 100% open with everything that we do. We're not trying to hide from people that it's a blend. We're not trying to do any of that. We're actually kind of happy, and we just want to make sure that people understand that when they're buying a bottle with our name on it, that the quality is going to be there. It's not just something that they threw in a bottle, that we actually took the time and the legwork to go out and do this. So we're going to kind of run it in that kind of mentality as well. So
just completely transparent as to what it is.
Yeah.
I think there are several 100% sourced, and Bardstown's partially sourced with their releases. Four Gate's done a tremendous job of sourcing and blending and secondary finishes, and they're getting a premium at $175 a bottle.
Yeah.
So companies like that have proven that you don't necessarily need to be the distiller if you are a master blender and perhaps adding some innovations with secondary finishes.
And I think that's one of the things that when we talk about the Whiskey Trust and the fact that they really weren't producing straight bourbon, they were more about rectifiers. They were supplying rectifiers and doing a lot of blending themselves with neutral grain spirits. So you're in the tradition of
Yeah.
what happened in that town for so many years. Would you pay homage to the trust with a name at some point?
We've talked about it. There's a gentleman we talked about collaborating with in Chicago. He's got the rights to the Schufelt name. He's also got the rights to the Green Hut name. I think he's going to do that on his own. We were going to collaborate with him on it. It never really was put together.
Yeah.
But we are using Easton. You've got the Woolner brothers, Adolph and Sam Woolner. You got John Francis. There's
some
a
names
series
there.
of characters that are always pop up, and so does anybody remember the Green Hut name? No. Does anybody remember the Easton name? No.
Yeah.
But we're still. I think if I can describe anything that we do, it's very much with a nod to the past and a respect to the J.K. Williams name, and also to Peoria, and the river, how this town was built. And when we can show an historic home or the story of one of the characters there, that's really organically natural for us. That's what we should do that.
Well,
and remind people there were some characters, perhaps not, again, the greatest people in the world, but who built this town. And that's what made this place.
Yeah. Well, I think the fun part about using these old names is it gets people to ask questions. And if you think about it, how many people know that Colonel E.H. Taylor is the man behind the Bottled in Bond Act? But you start seeing bottles of Colonel E.H. Taylor, and you're like, Colonel, what's... and so you start asking questions. The more you ask questions, the more you learn. And I think it adds an extra mystique to the bottle as well.
Well, and beyond that too, they had the Oktoberfest this past weekend that we went down to, and we were in the German history tent, and actually Green Hut's in there, but he was a military colonel or something along those lines as well. So he was an army guy, and he came back in and became one of these whiskey guys as well. So
yeah,
very very interesting. It causes people. You're right. It piques interest, and it says, well, what else is around here?
Yeah. Yeah, his history goes, actually, he was at Gettysburg, he was at Fort Donelson, he was at a lot of he was at Chattanooga, he saw a lot of action, and actually had been wounded and was out for a while and went back. So, I mean, for all the stuff he did with the trust that kind of probably tore his name down, prior to that, he was a Civil War hero. So, yeah. A lot of stuff you can dig in. And again, we wouldn't know that stuff if we didn't hear his name first and then go, okay, who is this guy and what's he all about? So definitely a lot of room for that.
But obviously the Bradley name is one of the most prominent. Tobias Bradley was one of the whiskey barons. His widow, Lydia Moss Bradley, founded Bradley University. Used the liquor money. I won't call them ill-gotten gains, but I mean, use the liquor money and that fortune to found this great university. So, the philanthropy that came out of this business historically has been phenomenal in town here.
Yeah. Well, and it is hard to say ill-gotten gains. They changed the law to try to get them to stop doing what they were doing, because it's the antitrust thing was not in existence when they started up as a trust, but it was kind of a reaction. It's just where it gets a little bit shady is when they decided to get the board of directors together and say, or board of trustees together and say, well, they're passing this anti-trust legislation. Why don't we just turn this into a company and keep doing the same thing? So that's where it starts getting a little shady. And like I say, then dynamiting your competition to try to get them to sell themselves to you. Yeah, that's a little rough. So we'll talk about the whiskeys that you have currently and kind of an idea. I saw American Single Malt, which always captures my attention when somebody mentions that they'll be coming out with something like that. So what do you have now, and what are you working on for that time down the road?
So we have 3 expressions out right now. We have our Gold Zephyr Bourbon, which I don't know if Annie said, just took best in state in the Heartland competition through the American Craft Spirits Association, so we're very proud of that. And then we also have our Stormy River Rye, which is in short supply, but that's a 90% rye mash bill, 10% wheat. They're both at 90 proof, and they're very well received in the area. So we're really happy with those. And then our newest one is the American Wheat Whiskey, actually, and it's the Bridge Series.
Okay. And is it a wheat whiskey or is it a wheated whiskey?
It's a wheat whiskey.
It is a wheat whiskey. Okay.
Yeah, it is a wheat whiskey. Yeah, it's 73%, 95% wheat whiskey, and then 27% are wheated bourbon that's distilled up a little bit higher. So it's a little bit cleaner and a lot sweeter. So we blended those two together to create an American wheat whiskey out of it. And then
and it's just smooth and terrific.
Yeah.
We're really proud of this one.
Yeah, I tell people if you're not big into bourbon and not big into ryes, a lot of people aren't because they're kind of spicy or whatnot. I say it drinks more almost like a Canadian whiskey than or a Irish whiskey than it does a bourbon or a rye. So it's a nice entry product in my mind. And then the bourbon and the rye recipes will remain the same for those two. But then of course I'm going to be, once the big system gets here, the small system becomes my playpen, so to speak, and I get to play around with recipe formulation and make other products and go from there. So, single malts, I was basically making a single malt at Rebecca Creek is what I was doing down there, and I really do like single malts, mainly Highland. I'm not so much of the Isla kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely be playing with some single malts, and the industry is trying to get an American single malt category into the TTB, so that'll be nice if we can get that done.
Yeah.
And then it's just going to be varieties, maybe if we can get some heirloom varieties in, or there's a lot of local farmers that said they'd help, grow some stuff for us if they wanted us to put something in. We just got to figure out what we want and what we need. And with my rum background, I'll obviously be doing some rums on the side as well. So
yeah,
a lot of fun.
You won't be fighting the challenge of aging probably as much as you did in Texas, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Texas and Louisiana both are pretty rough on aging.
Yeah.
So it definitely speeds it up, but it can go south really fast.
Yeah.
So if you're not careful.
Well, it can help you get it to market a little bit faster, but then it's those rough edges that can sometimes be the.
Yeah, that's why you need the extra time in the barrel, to get those rough edges out. But if you're over extracting, then you're kind of too late. So.
Yep. I don't want to say it's temperate. But I'm from Minnesota, so it's temperate compared to Minnesota.
Yeah.
And then Jeff's on the opposite side saying, you've seen nothing in humidity till you live in Louisiana. So I think we're closer to Louisville and Kentucky.
Yeah.
And we're a little more in that Indianapolis kind of temperate. So we're much warmer than my previous life in Minnesota. Where, it's like typically 15 degrees in the winter, warmer here, and so we get some really nice fluctuations. But probably colder than Louisville for sure. We get more snow than they do, but certainly the water with the limestone, the San Cody Aquifer that supplies water here is rated very highly.
Yeah.
I know the Kentuckians say we've got the best limestone and filtered water in the world. I don't know. We've got one hell of an aquifer underneath Peoria.
Yeah.
That could be called equally great.
So that's interesting to hear because we assume, and I've never really looked at the map to see where the limestone plate is, but I know it runs through Tennessee and Kentucky, and that is a given because the industry does a great job of promoting that, but we don't think of that being anywhere outside of those two states. So
they've done a tremendous job of telling everybody how great their limestone is.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I mean, it's just I don't know that this is any greater than theirs or vice versa, but it's obviously it makes for great filtered water. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
This is what we draw on.
Do you drink straight from the tap, or do you run through a filter when you drink it yourself?
I'd go where I'm at now in Peoria. I go straight from the tap.
Do you? Yeah.
Yep.
That's the true challenge. Whenever I go to Kentucky or to Tennessee, it's the only time when I really don't worry about taking a water bottle with me or anything. I just drink straight from the tap, and I'm good.
Right.
Yeah. Says a lot. So if somebody's coming to, well, first of all, let's talk about where you're available. So right now you're available in central Illinois, basically?
In the whole state. In the whole state. Of Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, we've launched. We've got distribution coverage in the whole state. We've recently, Binny's, who is the largest retail outlet for spirits and beer and wine in the state, has added on an additional, I think it's 14 stores in the Chicago area with us. And again, so Binny's, Friar Tuck are the big brands, but we're in a number of smaller on-premise and retail outlets now, and we're really. We had a very busy summer opening up our tasting room and all that, and now we're trying to get out in the field and promote the brands. And then we've got Wisconsin straight on the heels of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for this year. We need to strategize as we get towards the end of the year. What is the next natural state? It could be Iowa. Iowa's a control state, so it could be Indiana. We need to think that one through as to where we might want to go next.
Yeah.
But, clearly, we would like to add 2 to 3 states in 2022, and also some e-commerce solutions I've been working as well.
No whiskey trust strategy. You're not going to go in and start buying up distilleries, shutting them down, and selling out of there.
Dynamite it. Suspect fires in a string of distilleries across the middle.
Yeah, no. So if somebody comes to Peoria, is there any kind of experience? What's the best way to experience your whiskey in Peoria?
Come and visit us at our tasting room. It really is the best time, and you'll find Jeff's here. He says 7 days a week, and I believe him. He honestly is here, and we are too.
Yeah.
You'll catch one or both of us here many times on the weekends. We've got a great tasting room manager who will mix up a great cocktail. We've got 3 full flights. You can do each of the whiskeys, either neat or in a cocktail. And then if one of us is around, you can take a little tour and you can see what we have today, and then you can envision
what it's going to be.
New stills and the new equipment. But it's been transformed. It was a giant empty warehouse. And now we're filling it up, and with a little bit of vision, you can see where things are going, and what the new. Once we get our new equipment, it's all on order. We're hoping to have it by the end of the year, or very early next.
Nice.
And it will completely transform the operation.
That's when Jeff's a kid in the candy store, putting all that together.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on and talking about what you're doing, and it's going to be fun watching you grow. And I look forward to a day when I can actually walk around Peoria and see what and see if I can envision all those smokestacks around me and see what it looks like today in comparison.
We'll do it. No, we'll do it together, and we'll go down to the archive at Bradley. If we can get in there, that will be super fun.
That would be fantastic.
They've got quite a historical photo archive. It would be fun to go in there and see if they'll give us access to all that. You can see what I was talking about with some of these old pictures. But yeah, it would be fun to walk around town, and I'll definitely guarantee we'll do it with you.
Awesome. Awesome.
Good.
Well, Andy, Jeff, thank you. I appreciate it. And
we appreciate your time.
Much success to you. Yep.
For having us on.
Have a good one.
You too.
Okay.